anybody knew or had a family member or a friend that built websites, let them know. Nobody raised their hand. I can definitely build a website. I bought a computer a week ago. I bet I can figure that out for $3,000. I can
Figure anything out. Yeah.
doesn't matter what it is. So raise my hand. They're like, cool. They literally wrote me a check. I have no clue where I'll start, but I was like, great. They were like, call me next week and like, let's get started. And to this day, Mark Knox always pulls me about it. He's like, I cannot believe you just straight up lied to me the first time I ever met you. And I was like, hey man, listen, it worked out.
Chris, how are you? It's great to have you on today's episode. How's everything going?
Good, Mark. Thanks for having me. I know we've been trying to set this up for a while, so I appreciate you getting on.
Yeah. It was great getting to meet. I think we connected first at Expo West this year, which is a really killer event. Like, what an awesome event this year.
So that's my first time going, and like, it is, people kept saying, oh, it's the Super Bowl. Oh, it's everything. Like, when there's multiple floors of CPG companies, food, beverage, everything under the sun, it was a little overwhelming.
It is overwhelming. It's like it, and don't even have to travel for it. Like, I'm local. And I can't imagine going to that show with travel and not being in my own bed would be really exhausting, because it is just an overwhelm of every sense. I mean, it's like you have smell, you have taste, you have sight, you have sound. Like, at least if you go to a normal trade show, there's no real smell or taste, right? It's kind of like sound and visual, but that show just wires you in all your senses.
Yeah, it hands down the biggest show I've ever been to, and I feel like I've been to a lot.
Yeah.
Some of the most food I've ever ate at a show.
I know. I was stuffed. Yeah.
So,
How about those beef tallow fries
dude,
that we had?
we have some in the freezer now.
Nice.
Beef tallow fries. So, yeah, good hookup.
Yeah, that was awesome. Well, I'm stoked to have you on today. I think what we can start off is like, Chris, you've done so much over your career and had like this paradigm of shifting from being an athlete to an entrepreneur, and now, being, essentially the founder of 51 Ventures. And what you guys are doing at 51 Ventures is like incredible. You guys have an awesome team, so many cool strategic investments. But I'd love to just have you start off from ground zero. Like, start off with, let's start off with your athlete story, because I think that'll really build who you are today.
Yeah. I guess, I'll start with like maybe the college first. So,
let's start with college. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went to college, and it's funny because I always make the joke to everybody that, I came from the opposite of money, which was no money and pre-NIL. There was no extra dollars floating through lockers, especially not the long snappers locker. And so I was very fortunate to go on scholarship to Stephen F. Austin, and I was a long snapper there. And I get there, and that's great, and everything's kind of taken care of. But on the other side of that, you still needed to like eat out, hang out with friends. You still needed like books. You still needed stuff to be able to go to
college.
School.
Ain't cheap.
Yeah, you still had to live and everything. So it was like there was still things, and I was like, I remembered going to my first practice, and my senior kicker at the time, so I was a pike because of him. And so he literally told me that day, he was like, hey, you're going to rush pike. And I was like, I'm not doing that. He's like, no, it's really not a question. If you're going to snap for me, you're going to rush, period of stories. The correct answer was yes, sir. Right. So I go to our first like actual meeting, and the entire alumni board was there, and they were talking us through some things that we had to do. And the funniest thing, like to this date with that group, is that one of the things they talked about was they had $3,000 allocated for somebody to build a website, and they would love to keep it close to house, in-house. If anybody knew or had a family member or a friend that built websites, let them know. Nobody raised their hand. I can definitely build a website. I bought a computer a week ago. I bet I can figure that out for $3,000. I can figure
anything out. Yeah.
Doesn't matter what it is. So raise my hand. They're like, cool. They literally wrote me a check. I have no clue where I'll start, but I was like, great. They were like, call me next week and like, let's get started. And to this day, Mark Knox always pulls me about it. And he's like, I cannot believe you just straight up lied to me the first time I ever met you. And I was like, hey man, listen, it worked out. So fast forward, I ended up building the website, and we launched it a couple months later, and I taught myself how to code through that process. I was very amateur, I would think at best, but grew into it over the years. And the moment we launched, we had a bunch of phone calls from alumni that was, hey, I have a law office. We're looking to redo our website. Hey, I have an RV park or a dealership. We're looking to redo our website. Who built the Pike website? We loved it. And they're like, some freshman that also plays on the football team. Like, no idea. And so I start getting all this inbound leads.
Wow.
And within like a couple of years, I built 150 websites. And it was like, what the heck is happening? Like, I have no idea.
Crazy.
I was doing a freelance work at this point. I didn't know it was a thing. I have one guy, my actual big in my fraternity, to thank for helping me like kind of like figure out like, how do you set up an LLC? How do you do this? Like what should I be doing, you know? And so quickly after that, once work started coming in, I quickly figured out this thing called Fiverr at the time, which was huge. I think it's still pretty big, but just freelance work. And I started like outsourcing everything. By the time my fifth year hit, because I redshirted my freshman year, and then by the time my fifth year hit, we'd hit 40 developers on staff. It was just one of these craziest things. I had a CTO, I had a couple partners. It was like the wildest thing ever.
I'm just curious, how much were you making as like a senior?
So this is the funniest
Yeah.
part. So I actually, too much. We were nudging at $1 million ARR, and it was
Yeah.
like one of the wildest things because you're like that kind of money at that stage was insane. Secondary to that, I got really lucky on like this kind of like creative thing that I didn't know was beneficial for me at the time, but we were subsidizing essentially costs for equity advisory positions in some of the companies. So
Wow.
some of the startups would come to us and they'd be like, hey, we quote them, it'd be 25 grand. They'd be like, ugh. And then I'd be like, well, you do it for maybe 10 or 15 and I'll take like 2% of advisory shares or whatever it is. That started to stack up over time. And by the time you got, 40, 50 companies on the road, that you had a bigger portfolio than most venture funds for not putting in any cash, it was this random thing. So that was like actually like the big drive.
How did you think of that? Like of
It was
getting advisory shares for these startups, like for doing I mean, that's genius.
The funny part was is
Yeah.
it was on accident, right? It was not intentional. It was just
Yeah.
kind of like, again, I was only so business savvy at that point in time. It
Yeah.
was one of those situations where it was like, hey, I'll take like equity and trade kind of thing because, I was starting a business. I also was running a small business at that one time. It was like, if I could trade out a couple of points of equity for something that I really needed, I think it's beneficial. And it just kind of naturally came up through a couple conversations. And then I just started doing it. Had no real idea as like what that would end up entailing like later in life. But I started doing it and it started working. So we just kind of stuck to it.
That's insane. And so what happened to that business? Where did it go from when you were in school?
So fast forward, I guess like senior year, that fifth year again, I'd met with 30 of the 32 NFL teams, knew there was an opportunity that I was going to go play, talked to my CTO at the time, and I was like, dude, like, I don't want to be a nerd my whole life and building websites. It's kind of like not my thing. I'm going to go play football. We were all on the same page. Everybody was all for, Chris, go play football. That's great. So we kind of shopped it a little bit, and then there was a larger agency that ended up purchasing just the entire book of business and everything about it.
Wow.
So
Was it a decent exit for you?
it was a good exit. I think it set me up for like a good few years of like really giving a run at playing and not having to sweat or worry about like what was next. So
For sure.
I think I got a good lucky springboard.
Wow. So you finished school, had a, great career playing college ball and building this business. And now you're done with school. You have your first exit. You've got some advisory shares from all these companies you've been a part of. And now you're playing pro football.
Yeah, kind of. So we go into the draft,
Yeah.
and at that point in time, draft day comes around, but we all knew there was an opportunity, and keep in mind, like one snapper a year at best is drafted, right? Like
Yeah.
actually drafted, and so we had conversations around it with multiple teams that if you're on the board come the seventh round, like there's an opportunity, just kind of depending on how things play out. We also already had, I don't think this is technically legal, but we already had like verbal agreements that, hey, if we last till after the draft, I knew where I was going.
Yeah.
And so Draft day comes around, and day 3 comes, and I get a call in the 6th round, and this is probably the funniest story that I have. So I was obviously buddies with a bunch of snappers too. We all kind of trained together and everything. Friend of mine, Austin Cutting, played at Air Force specifically. The 6th round rolls around, and the Minnesota Vikings call me, and they're like, "Hey, we have 3 picks in the 7th. We're gonna take you on the 2nd. Be ready. Got the card in hand." Okay, great. This is great. Perfect. Everybody's here. Great. We're like looking up like what hashtag do I use? Like which one? I'm like texting a couple people. I'm like, all right, we got to figure this out. Comes across, and they end up taking Austin, one of my buddies.
Oh, wow.
Whoa, didn't expect that, and that was the wildest thing ever experienced in my life. And so we're sitting there like there's 10 picks I think left at that point in time, and I'm just sitting in this chair. I feel like this weight on me of like, what just happened? I don't know, because I was just told they're taking me. Fast forward, long story short, I ended up finally getting to talk to Coach Ficken, who was there at the time, and he was just like, way it goes. Ownership came in, was like, hey, if we're going to take one, we want it to be this guy, period, in the story. Like, that was pretty much the conversation. And everything at that point happened so quick for me. San Francisco calls me. They're like, hey, deal's still good. Don't answer the phone for anybody else. We're sending paperwork now, right? And so I got that phone call, and that was obviously great. And there's actually a video of me on that call, it's awesome to have that. But so everything just moves so quickly for the next like 4 or 5 hours. Your phone's blowing up, everything, and you're there signing the paperwork. And then about, I would say like 11 o'clock that night, Ficken from the Vikings calls me and like kind of tells me what happened. And I was just like, dude, I get it. And they had already spoken to San Francisco, and like everybody, I think everybody was on my side with it. I don't think there was any ill will, intentional, right?
For sure.
That by any means. It's just kind of luck of the draw, and that's business. So it ended up okay. Yeah.
Nice. And then how did that career go?
It was good. So, I was there in 2019. Was there totally to take the job, and did at first. I think partway through the year, there was some nerves around the young rookie snapper as we were going to make a deep run. And that's fair and understandable. So they ended up bringing in Colin, and then Kyle came back from injury, and I was on practice squad at that point. We made a good run, and then they released me that year. And then I bounced back and forth with Tennessee in 20 because of the whole COVID thing, and that was a crazy story of just living in that. And then 21 with Tennessee, and then worked out for probably 12 teams at that point in time. And I remember getting back from Arizona, calling my agent, and I was like, dude, I'm done with this. Like, it's time for me to move on from football, like working out for teams. I think that's something that you can't really describe to anybody unless you like really live in that moment.
Sure.
Flying out, hey, you're great, we're not going to sign you today. Hey, fly you out, hey, you're great, we're not going to sign you today, right? Over and over again, you're like performing the best at peak, and you're just like, what's wrong? And so it's a mental game too, and I think a lot of people forget that part of it. So anyway, called my agent that day, and I was just like, I'm ready to move on, and I think I got my thing, so I'm going to go do it.
And then what was that? What was next?
Yeah, so I had this, it kind of built out a semi-product called Sideline Design at the time, and what it was a recruiting automation software platform for coach to high school player communication, and it automated a lot of that process from text and emails to content creation, and
Cool.
I really wanted to double down on that, so that's what I did, left, started doing that, and then fast forward a few years, we were offered to be acquired, and then I ended up selling to a PE group, and then that was a couple of years ago now. So
Nice. That's awesome.
yeah.
So what was the name of that company?
Sideline Design.
Sideline Designs. Very cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so you're done. You're now in your 20s, had your second exit, right? What's next?
Yeah. I think that was where it got interesting because I didn't really know the answer to that. At that point in time, I'd led some SPVs with buddies of mine and things like that, guys that were still playing. And, just naturally, I was the guy that I had raised money for Sideline in the past. And so, had rough ideas of structurally how to do that. And so, kind of came up one day where it was like, I feel like this, and this is post exit, a few months of me doing really not anything because I didn't know what I was going to quite do with this. Got reached out by a couple of companies where it was, hey, would you like to advise, consult with us? Like, we're building in this space and you've had success in this space. Like, what does that look like? And, I was just like, maybe there's something more here to uncover, like where I could actually help. And I always had trouble, not trouble in a bad way, but like you would raise money and it was always like, is it just dead weight on the cap table? Like, are they just worth the check that they wrote, right? And that's so common, and I've heard that story so many times across so many different avenues where I was just like, all these investors, they write money. They get it. They write checks. That's their value prop, and they say, oh, we help, or we have insights and we have resources and connections, but then the follow through I feel like is always weak. And so I was like, I have a lot of connections, a lot of resources, especially just from building Sideline itself. I'm a few phone calls away. I feel like I'm a lot of places to be able to start companies, but I don't have my own idea, and I think I'm, you know, on to my next leg, if you will.
Yeah.
And I've sat in a lot of these chairs across this ecosystem. I was like, maybe we start investing, right? Like maybe we really do. And so I started, and quickly, but surely, I was trying to like kind of establish a bit of a team, so to speak. And that's where I started coming across like great people that had built their own companies, been successful in this space. And it was like, wow, if we could really build like a true community of people that were on the side of the startups and write a check and then totally have great effect immediately with them, there's something really to that. And so we just started trying that way, raised a little bit of money in a fund one, and deployed that last year, about 10 checks. And then quickly fast forward to, we're walking into year two and we're raising our next fund and deploying more capital. And it was like, okay, we can actually do this. And I think we had a few very successful companies last year that very quickly raised follow-on capital from us. So it's been good.
That's awesome. So still like, still a new thing, but obviously you guys are getting momentum right now. What is your investment methodology right
Yeah.
now with everything you guys are doing?
Yeah. So, we operate what I would say the sports health wellness space. And I think that there's something specific to highlight with that, because I think a lot of people say, hey, we're sports investors, and what they really are is media investors. And I think there's a lot of health and wellness investors, and I think what they really are is more like health tech, right? And like there's kind of this awkward like symmetry like right in the middle that I look at, where it's that true sports health wellness that overlaps, because I look at it from the aspect of high performing athlete, everyday athlete. There's something in the middle. That something in the middle is saying that we are collecting more data on ourselves than ever before. We have biomarkers, we have more analytics, we know more about our body than ever before. But then that data, that analytic is telling us that we need to make it better. We need to change some things. So then that brings in the side of like CPG, better for you, health, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
you need to eat better, sleep better, recover better, work out like this, do these things, track these things, right? And then turn that data into a better product of you, right? And so there's that synergy there between the high performing athlete, everyday athlete that I look at, where it's like, I want to own that ecosystem and invest there, because I think health for the next 20 years is the play.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, we've, I think when you look at every generation right now, from, from boomers to Gen X to millennial to, down the whole funnel, it's health and wellness we're seeing massive investments across the board in each vertical. Yeah.
Everyone's taking it into their own hands, right? Like they're bypassing all of the stuff that they've been told for years and years, and like looking like, okay, why is there 800 ingredients in my chip, right? Like why isn't it just tortillas, beef tallow, and sea salt, right? For example, right? Why does that protein bar have a million ingredients in it, and what are the causes of those things, right? Like what actually happens to my body when I have that? What is my Whoop telling me that I need to do better to decrease my heart rate? What is that data? Like uncovering all of that, people are taking health into their own hands more than ever today. And I feel like those are the things we need to keep amplifying, and I feel like they are.
What are some of your favorite investments that you guys have made so far?
You know, I'll give you two. So I'll give you one on like the tech side of things, and I'll give you one on like the CPG, like the food side of things. So on the food side of things, we've got It's That Simple, and it's a really unique concept, right? It's got ready-made pasta, ready-made rice, and it's low carb. And I think there's a lot to that, especially somebody like me when I talk about like the everyday athlete now, where it's like, hey, I'm used to eating pasta and rice when I worked out at the very peak of my existence, right? Like I used to carbo load like crazy. I can't do the same thing today, right? I need to combo that with other elements, and so that's like actually a really big piece. They've done a great job. And then on the flip side of that, we've got Paizen, and Paizen actually measures the cognitive response of your body. And so
Oh,
instead of
wow.
Whoop, where they're tracking, you know, obviously daily activities, Paizen technology uh, measures your mind in a sense and like tracks that and like how you react throughout the day. And so I think there's two things there that really kind of speak to our thesis.
That's awesome. And when it comes to investing, what are you guys looking for in a brand? Like, where are you guys investing in certain rounds,
Yeah,
pre-seed,
yeah,
angel?
yeah, yeah. We like to be early, right? I think my team lives and breathes early and wants to like get their hands dirty. So pre-seed, seed, and Series A is really a big focal point for us.
Awesome. And are there any markers that you're looking for into how a company's set up, or what a founder looks like, or what the TAM looks like when you're going in to these
So
companies?
good question. I harp on this that I like to throw TAM out the door. I like to throw some of these basic knowledge points out the window because I think a lot of it's irrelevant at that stage. And a lot of investors behind closed doors will tell you, yeah, it's irrelevant. But then they'll go out and tell the founders that this is what they need to get to and their TAM needs to be big enough and all of the jazz, right? And I'm like, I'm going to cut to the chase and tell you I think a lot of it's bullshit, right? I think a lot of the things that we try to look at today are bogus. And there's a lot of, I was told this once before. Num, uh, Liars figure and figures lie, right? And it's like you can make the numbers say anything you want. You can make projections look any way you want. What I'm looking for is I'm looking for the best founder. I'm looking for the founder that understands the problem. I'm looking for the founder that can sell. I'm looking for the founder that can execute. And I'm looking for the founder that's not afraid to call it bullshit, right? That's where my mind goes to because having a good product is one thing. It's probably the easiest thing to come by today, right? We have so much technology. There are so many smart people. There are so many elements that we can build with. It's the person that's going to drive that home. And I think if you look across like the sectors of like these big brands, like how did they get there? By absolutely insane founders. That's just the truth, right? Like these guys that come in or girls that come in and they're absolutely maniacally insane and they're fixed on that one point that they're solving and they're solving a true problem. That's the difference, in my opinion, versus, oh, it's great tech, right? Everybody can have great tech.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you made a very valid point. Like there's a there's a lot of product and a lot of ideas on the market, but if you don't have the right founder who's steering the ship every day with a relentless attitude and commitment, then what's the chance of success?
Low.
Yeah,
In
very
my,
low.
I mean,
Yeah,
they've got, because there's so many things that come through your founder experience, especially in the first handful of years. There's so many issues that you're gonna have to overcome. It's a lot like being a collegiate pro athlete, right? Where it's like there's obstacles, there's hurdles, there are tough times, and you're gonna have to get through those. If you're not the guy or the girl that can fix those problems and handle those issues, the company's dead anyway, and it could be the next Whoop, it could be the next Oring, it could be the next whatever it is, right? But if you can't get through those problems, it's irrelevant.
for sure. Well, being the founder at 51, like how did you build the team?
Great question. Um, you know, when I started, I started pounding pavement around just trying to figure out like what kind of team, what kind of who I was going to look for to kind of like bring in, and I was very fortunate, to really hit LinkedIn hard. I stand on the fact that LinkedIn is a great place to find people still, no matter how crowded some people might say the DMs get. if you have the right proposition, I think there's a lot there. So I started reaching out on LinkedIn to a lot of people trying to find those right fits. And I was looking for some key components. I was looking for people that had been at other funds before because, I knew my knowledge was this high, but I was looking for this high, right? And
Yeah.
specifically if they were limiteds or involved heavily on anything in that side. And then I looked for people that had invested heavily before, right? People that had like a deep portfolio, especially in this type of space, and a good track record there. And the last key was like you have had to run your own company before, right? You've had to have been on that founding team because I wanted you to understand A, what it was like to run, but B, what it was like to raise and what some of those issues and constraints were. And I got really fortunate and found great team members. Two actually ended up coming from LinkedIn. Now some of my best friends, and one was introduced to me by an outside, and poor Natalie, she just, I never stopped talking to her. And so she's been great. So yeah.
Very cool. And when it comes to raising this next round, like what type of investors are you guys looking for?
Yeah, I think that's been the most interesting piece as we kind of transition from, so first and foremost, we're a capital group that has various funds underneath us. And I think that's been the most interesting piece where a lot of individual investors for us invest in our Topco, our management company that owns the various funds. And then within each individual fund is set up strategically for certain types of fits at the institutional level. And so it's been cool, interesting, headache, all of the above, right? To be able to kind of transition what some of my raising platform looked like, where it was like approaching a lot of angel type investors to now approaching a lot of institutional capital. And I think we were very fortunate with some of them early on and some of my early backers that were good names and it was strong, where it was like, hey, a lot of like the validity for us is already lying in some of the DD that these have done. And so that's kind of our target now, is just kind of broadening the stroke from the traditional strategic angel investor to where does institutional capital come into play, and what strategies in strategic capital can those people entice for us as well as they write bigger checks. So
Absolutely. And when it comes to checks, what type of check size are you guys normally writing?
yeah, so we vary. So I'll give you two answers because we have kind of two different setups, right? So we have this thing where we're more of like an opportunity check, and we'll write anywhere from 50 to maybe 200K, and that's to try to get us in the door, be unbelievably early and hands-on, right? And opportunistically invest in deals that may be hot, and we may be trying to squeeze in early to add value and do things with. And then now from our next fund, our big focus is what is that 750 to $1.5 million check look like, and completely doubling down and kind of owning and leading up and being not just unbelievably good at what we do outside of the capital, but now also leading the capital source where people look at us and say, hey, if 51 wrote $1 million check into that, I feel pretty confident in what they're doing. So I'm going to go alongside them in helping those founders raise even bigger rounds.
Very cool. And then I know you guys also have an interesting model where you guys are essentially like helping brands finance inventory, right?
Yeah, so one of our funds is a private lending fund, right, essentially. And I think something that was so interesting in the CPG space that I couldn't quite get over when I first really like dove super deep into it was that, we're writing a check to be on the cap table. I got that, right? I think everybody understands that concept. But then some of our companies need capital to grow. They don't necessarily need dilution. And I read a book once that it's not what you raise, it's what you own. And at the end of the day, if you can't grow, right? If you can't grow and I'm on the cap table, then I don't get the added benefit of that. The
Totally.
team doesn't get the added benefit of that. Why wouldn't we try to help them scale? I mean, we've got POs at Target that are 120-day turns. That's really difficult for a pre-series C, even some of those to even like manage, right? And so you're talking about, if I have equity in this business, why wouldn't I not lend? And it's a concept to me that has not made sense, that people don't do both. And I really wanted to change that, so we did. So a big part of our thesis is also providing growth capital for those POs, for those financing situations where we can inevitably help our companies grow as well.
Yeah, I think that product is just so vital right now, and especially in CPG. you make such a valid point. It's like these brands, like they need a credit line, they need financing opportunities, they need to be able to finance this inventory, and that's the only way to grow. Because it's one thing to get into Target, it's another thing to sell through a Target.
Yeah.
Once you do both, you still need to get paid,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And cash flows are tough, right? Like
Yeah,
you can only raise so you don't need to, in my opinion, you don't need to raise $10 million. Instead, you could raise five, and then you know that you have finance ways and access to capital and other systems, right? Where, hey, we don't have to raise the extra 5 million. Let's lend the 5 million, and now you own what you own. The founders are protected. We're protected. The whole cap table is protected. It actually benefits everyone that's on the cap table. It's not that we're trying to take away anything. But I would rather give them a good interest rate where we have the benefit, they have the benefit, instead of them going and getting some of these short-term loans that are, I mean, I'm seeing like 30%, 40%
yeah.
interest.
These short-term loans in the D2C space,
Yeah,
especially, are literally paralyzing these brands. I
yeah,
hear these stories left and right where companies that are healthy are like on the verge of bankruptcy because they're cannot pay these loans back.
yeah, yeah,
It's modern day D2C mafia,
no doubt.
Shopify loans, Stripe loans.
Yeah,
I mean, it's crazy.
yeah.
Yeah,
And it needs to be changed, in my opinion. Once I really dug into that, it again, I just couldn't make sense of not doing it, to be honest. So,
absolutely. Well, with that being said, if someone's interested in investing into the fund or getting in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you?
yeah, if you're looking at investments in this space, if you're a company that's building in this space, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I think that's where I'm the most active. Me and my partners, we live on there. So my email is pretty easy to find, Chris at 51ventures.vc. Our website has it's 51ventures.vc. It has all of the forms that you can walk through, like various funds and amounts and things that we're looking at and submit. And we take a look at it all day long.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Chris. This was awesome. Stoked to
Yeah.
have you on today.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it, man.
This was great. Talk to you later. Bye.